Hey,
Hey, Toby. How are
how's
you
it?
doing?
I'm doing good. I'm gonna decrease the uh, auto appearance touch up going on. Look like there. No, I don't look like a TV anchor. I look like a pile of compound on my face or something.
You look fine. One sec here. But yeah, um, let me make sure this is set correctly. Okay, it's set correctly. I have
Yeah.
so many things I want to talk to you about, Toby. Just because you're you. Just as like a brief intro to what I know about you, you have an extensive background in performance. You've got initially a strong analytical background in mathematics, subsequently master's in kinesiology, PhD in performance psychology, and you're currently doing your secondary PhD in clinical work. Accurate?
Second masters. Yeah.
Your second master's, my apologies. You've done work with boxers, you've done work with businessmen, and you even did work with me. And one of the things that I remember very keenly is when I was practicing a demonstration, you were able to hone in on key tells to help me maintain flow and recognize how I needed to adjust myself.
Yeah. There's a degree of empathetic listening that I think I've perfected too. That kind of has transcended all the training that I've done. I think maybe having been a high school teacher, I got to see enough teenage behavior to see in adults that what looks subtle to the common eye maybe isn't so subtle to me. But yeah, absolutely. I think that's I wish I could explain that skill a little bit more detail, but you watch enough performers, akin to a batting coach. A batting coach has seen enough hitters that a batting coach can watch a batter who's struggling and can give a couple thoughts in that batter's mind that will change the way the batter is relating to hitting the ball. That will then unlock what has been holding the batter back. And it always is in some way, we get in our own way. Rarely is somebody so grounded that they're able to deliberately and consistently create bad luck for somebody else, to create to interfere with success with somebody else. They can do it in one moment, but persistently. So we start feeling frustrated and we start noticing that we're not getting where we want to go. Then to me, okay, now that's an internal condition. That is a roadblock. And so then it's just going back to all the work that I've been doing with people forever. I'm really getting to see that person, know that person, and starting to understand where they are putting their own roadblocks in. And then I guess this is where I guess theory wise it came in after the fact, but kind of the Jungian theory of positive regard being one of the most important factors in any sort of helping work.
Can you
And
elaborate on that? Yeah.
yeah, so what that means is as a as somebody trying to help somebody else, you have to ultimately hold them in a perspective that they're a unique human that's capable of making their own decisions and is and you fully support them in their uh, desire to live a self-directed life. So basically, you want to be unattached, even those things that you might make you feel icks. You don't tune into that. It doesn't matter. You feel responsible enough in yourself that you don't um, need to react to the things that they do that makes you just feel uncomfortable. And you're aware of yourself of what is your voice talking versus what is their voice talking. And then I guess what I'm getting into in a bigger picture is that for a lot of people, there just is really nobody um, who is low enough on the narcissism level, because I think ultimately narcissism is a survival trait. It, how how does biological life uh, continue to exist? It needs to care for itself first. So narcissism is just inherent in biological life. We're gonna prioritize ourselves first. That's what I mean. And so we're not going to get a lot of help from other people. They're actually not going to be that tuned into us. And so we're creating stories of other people in our minds of how they're relating to us, but really what they're not, what's really going on is they actually aren't relating to us. Most people don't think about you after they leave your presence. Pink Floyd, as an example, I wish I could remember the artist, the name of the artist, the lead singer and the guitarist for Pink Floyd, but their whole belief was that um, even when they're playing Wembley Stadium sold out, everybody there is just a figment of their imagination, because once the concert's over and those people leave and they're off in their own place, those people don't actually exist as far as they're concerned, right?
Yes.
And so if we think
Great
about that,
topics.
right? So if we think about that from a mental health perspective, right,
Yeah.
or just from a self, from how do we get in our way? A lot of times we externalize to people that are wholeheartedly not vested at that level into us individually. Oh my gosh, I feel so embarrassed about what happened at lunch or something like that. And 2 days later, it pops in your head. But those other people in the restaurant, everybody else who was there when you were having that experience, uh, through research, I can tell you that they probably don't even remember that moment. It's only significant to you. And it's a lot of things like that over time add up and create big obstacles for us. They create energetic obstacles for us because in our mind, our anticipatory system is going down these dark holes. And then where the positive regard comes in is, what if there's another person there that's like, hey, yeah, that doesn't sound like that's that bad, but it sounds like you had an opportunity here. And what did you learn in that opportunity? Or it sounds like these situations come up and there are opportunities to try something different. What happened? How is it hard to try something different there? How can we make it easier to try something different there? Hey, I'm here to pay attention to you and to see you wanting to change you and encouraging you on it. Just that little bit of connection creates a huge amount of energy in the individual to actually go through the change that they have. And so that, I guess, to kind of roundabout through that answer, to get, it's so hard. Parsimony has never been my strong suit.
No, I don't want you to be that way. I want you to be you because in the time I've known you and worked with you, I have spent years reflecting on everything you've taught me, and it's all come and hit me in the face over and over and over. So I'm trying desperately, and it's funny the things you just talked to, like take for instance the Pink Floyd situation. They're actually, as you know, in just to get a little bit meta here, in the quantum mechanical realm, there is a distinct probability that we are projecting the environment around us in a complicated way. And we don't need to go into the depth of that, but there's more than just using this as a mental model. There is validity here. And there's validity in it, not just in the fact that these people aren't thinking about you, but I think that's the most important thing to consider. They're people, self-included. I am too insecure to be really worried about Toby. I'm too insecure to be worried about what anyone else is doing because I'm thinking about me and I'm dealing with my own blocks. I know that everything you do is very individual and it's very tailored. To that end, I'm willing to put myself out there and illustrate to the audience my work with you in the past and kind of the blocks you've identified with me. because you can see through it. And I'm okay putting it out there. I don't care what people think. Well, that's half true, right? I'm going to put it out there anyways. But like, for instance, I'm just going to do this and I'll let you take away if you have any thoughts. When we met 2 weeks ago at Coffee Garden, I told you about this summer and how I was dealing with some stuff with my ex-wife and how it was a difficult situation and how we were using AI to respond and we were ensuring that we weren't being emotional. But what you brought to my attention, you're like, well, you noticed you had an emotional response and normally you push forward. What is that emotion actually telling you to do? How do you reframe that? And I was like, at first I was like, I don't know how to talk to this. I was caught in the headlight, but then you kind of explored it with me and walked me through it that it means to stop. And I have caught myself perpetually running into text messages or emails where I feel the urgency to respond. And I am trying to focus on the stop part. I'm going to stop there, but I've just noticed that. Do you have anything like I am happy with you sharing anything you've seen about me? What do you think, for instance, with me is a primary roadblock I experience? And I bet a lot of people can relate to it.
I think one of the places that a lot of people get stuck with, and I think one of the things that we worked on is avoiding creating dogma in your life. Avoiding, I think one of the easiest cognitive fallacies, flawed ways of thinking to get into is an absolute, a black and white form of thinking. Everything that almost everything in our lives on a daily basis exists on some form of a spectrum. How fast did you drive? Well, it depends where I am, right? How bright is the room? It depends on what I set the dimmer to. Uh, how much did that piss you off? Well, it depended on the situation where I was going, all that, right? So everything exists on a spectrum. However, our minds, which are the large, the brain is the organ that consumes the largest number of calories daily in
Yeah.
our body. So it's very metabolically expensive. So we don't want to overuse it. So we shortcut a lot. And that's where absolute thinking comes in. Now, how does absolute thinking become a roadblock? When you were working on your hyper, hypertrophy, when you're trying to when you were
Build up
bulking up
mass.
for the season, when you're adding mass,
Yeah.
it was a if if I didn't get enough calories in that day was a loss. This whole effort was a loss. It was an absolute. It was one of the roadblocks was if if I didn't hit the standard on one day, then that had more than just, hey, it's going to take a little bit longer now to reach the goal. It had, no, the goal becomes out of reach. Because I failed here, I'm going to fail on this goal. One misstep means catastrophe. And you would keep working, but you'd keep working with a different type of effort and motivation because you didn't feel that the result was actually attainable because you had an absolute thought in that one air. Now, going to people that were part of any form of high effort religion or any sort of orthodoxy type of way of living. Well, now you've spent some time conditioning yourself that absolutes are necessary in your life. And in addition, unique to Abrahamic religions,
Yeah.
religions that stemmed out of Egypt and stemmed from the migration of thought from the Middle East. Uh, all of that includes this idea of shame. That so then we have absolutes. You're either good or bad. Most likely you're bad because you're going to make a mistake, and if you make one mistake, then you're bad, and you're bad, and you're bad for life, and everything about you is bad. And so you've got to cover up that bad
Yeah.
versus it's a spectrum. Some days you make a lot of progress. Some days you don't make as much progress.
How do you help people reframe that? That's endemic in where we live in Utah with the LDS faith. There, I would say it's one of the most shame prevalent environments that you can operate in. How? How do we change this mindset? Because this still affects me. I am very black and white because it removes uncertainty. And I find myself perpetually creating dogma, even though, to quote a different coach I've worked with before, he said, there is no truth in dogma, which is fascinating. But I would love to know your thoughts on how do we deal with this?
Yeah. So dogma really is absolutist. Dogma is labeling things as good or bad. If and and it becomes globally that way as well. So then the first thing to do is to start to become aware of where dogma exists. One of the, I feel, one of the societal reasons for religion is to make it easier to govern a population.
Hmm.
Because what the government has on its side is punishment and whatever civil services it can offer. That's really ancient to modern governments. That's all they really have in terms of their levers. We can uh, imprison people, we can assault people with violence, and we can distribute uh, excess supplies, goods to people as well. That's kind of ancient time, but now that's all they could do. Now, what religion can do is it can approach the spiritual side of things. It can say it can attack it can go after the mental well-being aspect of societal life. So it can say it can bring in this idea of harmony, and if we're all good, we can have harmony with each other. The problem is it applies dogma, which means if we all conform into this box, if we all contort ourselves into this box, we'll have harmony within society and we won't have problems. Now we know the issue though is that human nature doesn't allow us to stay within a box.
No.
Our brains don't want to do that. So it's becoming where, hey, where are you contorting yourself? Where is this dogma actually making you have to feel contorted from who you are? And so one of the clear examples of that in any sort of Christian religious tradition or even Islamic tradition would be being gay, right? So right there, the religion's like, no, you're not. That's a bad choice. That's an unholy choice. God says that's not real. That's you need to quit being a sinner. But science tells us uh, it's actually not a choice. It's some form of biological determination.
Yeah.
And so dogma says I should go get conversion therapy. I should deny this part of me. I should not be this person. And we know people that live that way, that have large families
Yeah.
that do that instead of realizing, wait, this this idea, that's a belief system, not trees need water to grow. And if I don't water my plant, it will die. So it's not like a truth. It's a belief system. Doesn't work with what is going on with me. Notice where that is affecting you. Notice where that is causing you problems. Decide now here's the thing where I would say, decide what you want. It's not saying go leave the church, live this lifestyle, be this person. That's what you have to do. That would be dogmatic as well. It's saying, hey, you have choice here.
Yeah.
You can live this way and you can have these things, but you're also going to have these pains. you're also going to have this conflict. You're also going to have this issue in your life, and you have the ability to choose because you have the ability to understand that for you, the this is the choice that you desire for whatever rationale you've come up with.
Yeah.
And
You, go ahead.
I use that as an extreme example because it's one that's so clear cut.
It is.
But where it's less clear is more in the situation of um, how I conduct my business if I'm a business owner, how I choose to reward my employees.
Elaborate. Well, you said it's a little harder to articulate that. Um, but do you mean like somebody that's using primarily punishment and absolutes versus working with their team, trying to grow their team? Because I would argue, in my opinion, now I'm not you, I'm not a performance psychologist. I haven't studied what you've studied. But personally, in my limited experience, there's a statement that I believe in very deeply, and it's called treat a man like a king and he will become a king. What are your thoughts though on the matter? How do you feel about this whole thing?
Yeah, and so for so how do you show your LDS faith when you're a sales manager for a SaaS software company and one of your reps miss quota?
I would argue that you generally punish them in some way, shape, or form. You usually berate them. I think that's more common than working with them. Be like, hey, like, I don't see you being loving and compassionate, primarily because I believe these same individuals are not loving and compassionate with themselves.
Yeah, exactly right. And so the complexities of the faith, how do we treat other people? How do we communicate with other people? If you're the sales manager and your employee missed quota, what role did you play in that? Are you taking responsibility for that role? Um, does your God call upon you to take responsibility for that role? Does your God call upon you to understand the situation that this employee's in? Or does the business need supersede that? Oh, so you cannot be dogmatic in some areas of your life. In some areas of your life, you actually do have gray. So you have the ability to not be dogmatic.
Yeah.
It's easier because it's work, because there's expectations. Then you need to become aware of those decisions you're making at work because that's where you're living in the gray. And now you can start to see where dogma does and doesn't exist in your life. And maybe at work, it's a different form of dogma. Maybe at work, it's, if you're with Amazon, there is a very specific performance culture that Amazon has um, cultivated over their existence. The forced rankings and the expectation of a high turnover rate of dropping the bottom third as frequently as they can.
Mm-hmm.
If if there are always three categories of performers and you have forced leveling, you're living within dogma there as well. And so now are you becoming aware or are you so for the Amazon manager, are you aware of the choices you're making or are you just reacting impulsively to the structure that you are working within? I know reviews are coming up. I know I've got a performance level. That doesn't mean that's seeing ahead, but that doesn't mean that you're being aware. That doesn't mean that you're mindfully thinking through things. And I think that's where dogma really starts to get broken up is once you've identified some places where dogma exists, Now it's taking a different approach, which is understanding, wait, the my mind is trying to make life easier on itself, not on me, but on itself. The mind is trying to use fewer calories or get as much done with as little calories as possible.
My immediate thought process was the work that Huberman speaks of, and he was with Goggins, and they're like the anterior, uh, I think it's the mid anterior cingulate cortex, or you know which one I'm talking about. And this is exactly it. You push against that resistance, and that's the only way. Would you argue that's true to develop these new pathways?
100%. You have to somehow decide a different way of thinking. And we see that throughout all sorts of forms, self-help, personal philosophy, and psychology. So like in DPT, for example, they have, uh, what is it? Make, make the alternative choice. And so it's in one of the DPT modules, dialectical behavioral therapy. It, it's a, uh, it's a curriculum based therapy system, which means that just like algebra class, you know exactly what you're teaching in algebra class. In DBT, you know exactly what you're teaching and you know the progression through those lessons. And so one of those lessons is making making a different choice, usually for people without, addiction. So if you're thinking of like somebody trying to quit smoking,
Mm-hmm.
um, it would be at at your morning break, instead of going outside and having a cigarette, choose to go make a cup of tea. And just that one moment, practice making the different choice. Practice creating, and when you practice making the different choice, physiologically you get myelination happening, which now makes
Cross
that,
pattern utilization.
yeah. And then that choice becomes the higher potentiated choice, which means that choice becomes less calorie intensive than choosing to smoke.
I love this. This relates to me so well. I've studied neuroscience in my background in physics. And basically, what you're telling me is the only way is through. And if you want to change who you are, like for instance, I grew up in an environment where I had a very negative mindset. You can argue that is external conditions, internal conditions. It doesn't really matter. But I saw the world from a very bleak place. And you're never going to overcome that by constantly revisiting it. The only way that you overcome it is by changing who you're going to be now and realizing that your propensity towards those thoughts, the feeling that they are innate, that they are real, that they identify with who you are, is simply a result of myelination and internalization. And the only way through is to literally, in a context, somewhat fake it till you make it. But I wouldn't like to use that as my word. I would say do it until it is. What do you think?
Yeah,
Am
I
I
was just
accurate or am I off base?
absolutely accurate. I love that you brought up the fake it till you make it. I think the better updated version of that is acquire till you have. So I I like using analogies because they're an easier way to communicate, but put a lot of detail on that. So you want to
Right.
become an NFL player.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you're going to need to accumulate? Strength.
Hmm.
You're going to need to accumulate strength. So you got to, so that comes from the gym. That comes from lifting weights, right? Um, you're going to need to accumulate speed too. So that comes from plyometrics. So there's a different type of workout there. You're going to need to accumulate position specific skills. So those are drills. Those are working with coaches. Those are doing video edits. Those are doing all the different types of motor skill acquisition activities. You're not an NFL player as a high school freshman. You're a high school freshman playing high school football, and you're
Hmm.
doing that and you're accumulating those things that you need to be an NFL player. So if I want to have more joy in my life, what
Yeah.
what components, what are the components of joy? Am I first figuring out what are the things that I need to cultivate or accumulate in my life in order
Hmm.
for this to happen? So you have to go through the work of figuring that out. What are the things that would make my life better? Then the next thing that you want to do is then figure out which ones are the easiest for me to start obtaining now. So one of the things that we know with joy is connection.
Yeah.
Okay, how can I start creating connection with other people? There's you go to ChatGPT, go to Google, go to a therapist, but what you'll find is that generally how people do that is they find clubs or charities that have events and they attend those. They they join some sort of community organization that has regular, consistent meetings. Right. One of the things that I encourage people to do if they go to a new city and they're really lonely, hey, go sign up for a group therapy class because most likely your insurance will cover it. I I know in my therapist training, I'm planning on my therapy work being heavily group based because that's how you get that's how you can, as a therapist, make a living off of third pair pays. So group therapy gives you a way to meet other people and talk about things in a guided way that say gets you comfortable, right? That's a good place to start. Another place to start, join a sports league and join one that looks like a kind of silly sport, like kickball. Hard to have an ego when you're underhand rolling a big red ball and it's bouncing in a field. So then there's no, some of the social tensions aren't there. So look for something like that. Um, what I would advise against things that are generally quiet, things that aren't interactive with other people, concerts, bad place to go create socialization, uh, readings or art exhibits, kind of a tough place for that where it's meant to be quiet. Um, so that's what I'm talking about. So you want to have joy, well, start accumulating some of those things. Are you going to have tight, close connections right off the bat? No.
No.
But what you are going to have is a group of people that you're going to start seeing consistently,
Yeah.
right? Um, I want to become, you know, I want to actually create my own business. Okay, well, I know one of the most important things on that is understanding your market. Have you even put effort there?
Yeah.
What's the low hanging fruit? And so you're accumulating, you aren't faking until you make it. What you're doing is you're exhibiting the behaviors that are needed to obtain whatever resources that then allow you to have whatever it is you're trying to create for yourself. And so
Yeah.
it's less of fake it till you make it. It's more of build it, build the plane as you're flying.
Yeah. And I would say a simplification of this is William James's comment. If you want to become a successful person, act successful, think successful, and then by and by you become it. And a lot of people think that that means you're pretending or you're taking on the personification, but just in a certain way, and you're not doing the actions. But really, this whole idea that you're illustrating and that you really want people to understand is in order to be a certain person, you have to behave like that person. And you have to start, like you said, accumulating, acquiring until you reach that state of being. I would argue also there's an internal component to this that I imagine you can shed some light on that has to happen in sync with a lot of these behaviors.
Uh, so, so one of the really cool things that we've been able to learn from neuroscience lately is with the mirror neurons, that's where your self belief will get reflected around you. other people's mirror neurons will pick up on how you are feeling about yourself.
That's terrifying.
Yes. Yes,
I am now
absolutely.
scared shitless. I am definitely a
However,
lot more faking confidence. Well, being it, you know what I mean? Embodying it.
it's yeah. And so the embodying, you don't you don't have to believe I'm like you don't have to walk in believing I'm the strongest person in this room.
Yeah.
But what you do have to walk in believing is I'm capable and confident as I walk into this room. Because
Absolutely.
you don't need to reflect to other people, hey, I'm the best, because then you're going to reflect too. Also, you're going to reflect, hey, I'm arrogant. Hey, I put myself over other people. Hey, so there's probably a lot of other things that you're broadcasting there that maybe are counterproductive to what your goals are. And so then you're trying to fake it till you make it and you get frustrated because you're like, well, I walk in there thinking I'm the biggest, baddest person in the room and nobody receives me. It's like, yeah, you walked in there thinking you were the biggest, baddest person in the room. So people probably thought you were arrogant. People probably thought you were uh, exclusive, whatever it was.
Yeah. You know, you're tapping on something that I think is really important right now. You and I briefly talked about it in our last meeting, and I want to bring attention to it. To give you a brief overview of something that happened to me, and you're going to totally understand what we're talking about here. About 2 months ago, I met a gentleman, and this gentleman came off very confident and gregarious, very influential, and he was illustrating himself as somebody powerful, lots of connections, in charge, and you took him at face value, as you do a lot of people, and he was presenting himself this way. Well, there were some incongruencies that I didn't pick up on initially, but I ended up finding myself in a situation with this person that mid conversation, they started attacking my character, and they did it in a way that was carefully pivoted so I didn't notice it. And they became continuously more aggressive to the point they were yelling at me. And I did not know this person. I had barely known them a week. And by the end of the conversation, I felt like I was some sort of criminal and that I was basically destined for prison. And this person was my savior. And I was told I couldn't tell anyone about the conversation. And I was completely indoctrinated by this whole situation in a matter of 2 hours. What pulled me out of it is I called my wife and I was super emotional and I was trying to hide it. But she's like, what's wrong? You need to tell me. I'm like, I can't tell you. She's like, whoever told you not to tell me is fear mongering you. I'm like, they're trying to manipulate you because my wife knows these things very well. And I immediately reached out to several other people. And the very first thing they told me is, yeah, we cut ties with that person, not because we knew anything, but something inside us told us to avoid them, our gut. And I was like, crap, my gut. And that's kind of what I wanted to hit with you is this whole thing that we talk about how do you pay attention in a useful way to avoid being manipulated? And how do you manage well, let's just start with that. There's so much to attention that we talked about last time.
Yeah.
I
So
think a lot
that,
of people are up for manipulation right now, to be honest, as we're seeing in the environment.
absolutely they are. And I think it stems from a statistic I remember hearing early on during the pandemic when the US Surgeon General, and I believe this was before, um, I believe this was in early 2020, but it might have been 2021. It might have been under Biden. So I don't remember what Surgeon General it was. But the Surgeon General said they made a recommendation that every American citizen under the age of 90 goes and gets assessed for anxiety, for generalized anxiety disorder, because they believed at that time the prevalence might be as high as 95%.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Um, and when you're anxious, you are fully in that sympathetic nervous system. You are fight or flight or freeze. And your ability to use your frontal lobe is inhibited. your ability to record the full experience through your hippocampus and put it into long-term memory stores is inhibited because the activation of the amygdala and that fundamentally changes the functioning of the brain from being a fully human brain to being a hybrid human lizard brain. So it's so our processes work differently. Uh, that and you can look at the Huberman podcast and stuff like that to find the more detailed, nuanced neurology behind it. But essentially, our brains function fundamentally different when we're in threat mode. Uh, we're still able to use our full brains, but not in the same way that we can when we're in our parasympathetic, when we're actually able to create, think, dream, that type of stuff. And so, if we're already a bit in that state, it's it becomes hard because now you're trying to listen in a loud room. And so you're getting a lot of noise. But here's the cool thing about anxiety. You can quickly with anxiety distinguish what's noise from the external environment and what's internal noise. And so the answer to your question is first, if you want to be less manipulated, learn how to tune into what you're feeling and just learn how to tune into it first. Because I would say chances are, it, if you can hear what your body's telling you, you'll know the right reaction then. You have the ability to determine a course of action that's really represents you what you want then.
I love that. I
I
think of Peter Kalk's work immediately.
I could almost hear Jordan Peterson saying that exact phrase in reality, and he probably has somewhere, and I probably have heard it on something from him. Uh, and it's I've been doing this for a long time now, so I've forgotten more than most people will have learned about some of these concepts.
I can imagine so, but you also have the innate understanding. Um, no, this is huge because this obviously I'm taking all of this in personally for me, and I think a lot of people as they listen to this and as they see these snippets that I'm going to put out there, this is going to resonate with a ton of people because I think back on, let's just give one popular book as an example, Crucial Conversations, where how to manage it, how to manage the anxiety. What people don't recognize, and this is for me to pivot to Gabor Mate in his work in ADHD and his trauma background and what he's identified. We are living in a toxic society. Therefore, the vast majority of people have some level of trauma. And we know from the morphology that people don't get this. Like getting beaten, for instance, getting hit. People think that's abuse, but your brain doesn't understand the difference between your sensory cortex, your audio cortex, your visual cortex. It's all electromagnetic and it's all altering how your brain functions and it potentiates it. And you have to deal with that potentiation for the rest of your life. Now you can, like you've told me before, you have dark patterns. We'll call them dark spots. They technically can't go away. Suck it up. But what you can do is you can build bright spots around them and potentiate that and build an entirely new existence. And then I wouldn't call it avoidance of the dark spots, but you don't elicit attention to them. You focus your attention on the bright spots. I'm digressing. I'm sorry. Go on.
100% that's it though. But that's the idea. The idea is that it's going to be effortful.
Yes.
It's going to be hard. This changing the way, changing how your brain potentiates, changing which thoughts are more likely to come up. It's effortful and it takes time. It's a physiological process, much like muscle growth.
Perfect example. And if you want to continue to grow and continue to alter the way you see things to build self-confidence. I think that I don't know anyone that doesn't want more of that.
Yeah.
A lot of people feel guilty about it because, like we've said, the shame-based culture, people see self-confidence and self-development as some type of selfishness. And a lot of that is we can both easily illustrate the government does not benefit from someone operating autonomously. Therefore, everything in our society, not just religion, because religion was primarily a means of governance, does not focus on autonomy. It focuses on groupthink. And I would argue it focuses on control emotions. Fear is a control emotion. Like you said, it diminishes cognitive abilities. You don't want someone thinking, well, hell, we were giving the Egyptians alcoholic bread to keep them under wraps, the slaves in control. Like, you think that this is new? We've just gotten more sophisticated, far more sophisticated.
We've managed, well, the societies unfortunately have more often than not organized under hierarchies.
Yeah.
And hierarchies, unfortunately, more often than not, are subject to the human condition, which means that corruption and greed are inherent in hierarchies. It's part of the world that we haven't been able to control for. I think if we were to outsource elements of society, um, crypto is a great place to start. Outsourcing elements of our society away from human nature. Uh, a rules-based crypto that's got an AI backend that can modify the rules on the fly to benefit decrease suffering
Yeah.
would be ideal. We still have to come up with how do we define suffering, and so there's always going to be not good, but we could get less not good. Um,
Absolutely.
I think in that type of model, and so the the constant battle that we're going under is a good chunk of us, the majority of us, are actually probably actively out there trying to please the other person subconsciously because deep down inside our biological imperative is to gather resources that may be needed for survival. And let's be honest about this day and age. We just came out of a major pandemic. We have uh, we have an active war going on between Russian arms and American arms. That's scary. We haven't had that very frequently in our lives. That's instability. We have what's going on between Israel and the entire Middle East now.
Yeah.
That's unstable. We have the devastation that one hurricane just caused and the potential. Now it's in the news is not the devastation that as of this recording that the next hurricane is anticipated to cause. It's anticipated devastation that we're seeing now. So a lot of things that create that already negative undertone.
Yeah. I love this. Go
And
ahead.
fear of survival. So we're going to have a heightened need people that we see as maybe being resource rich and maybe being able to help us. We might subconsciously be trying to please them. How do you not get manipulated? Wait, am I listening
That's
to
a
my
deep
feeling?
thought.
That's where we're going back to is like, how do I not get manipulated? Are you listening to your feelings when you're talking to this person? Or are you worried about how they feel about you? And if you're worried about how they feel about you, yes, whether they want to manipulate you or not, you're being manipulated by this person, whether they want to manipulate you or not. So that's a behavior you just don't want globally, period. Why do you want to please people without first listening to yourself? Why do you not listen to yourself first, I would say it's because you're anxious, because you're fearful of the future. And how does that anxiety come into play on this? It means that you want to hurry up and get to some sort of this person is happy with you, and you get some form of agreement, feeling of alliance. That's what you're shooting for. That's what you're trying to get to real quick
Yeah.
versus I'm not anxious. So when I walk into a place, I'm in my parasympathetic. How do I feel?
Yeah.
Oh, why do I feel a little anxious around this person?
Yeah.
Hmm. Is this person interesting to me? Okay, let's explore that. Let's go talk to them.
This is
Versus,
huge.
right? And so it's feeling internal. It's having more than just the thought of it's not letting your thoughts alone be what drives the interaction. It's allowing your sensory system to drive it too.
You're starting from something that, tell me if this is what you're trying to say. We have hundreds of millions of years of training this internal system through evolution. There's a reason we have something called a gut. There's a reason we have something called a heart to follow. These terms we've developed language for, but they've existed since time immemorial, essentially. And what we've done, unfortunately, is we've developed this higher reasoning is we disconnect from that and we project outward. And you say this, a lot of this actually is primarily because it's not necessarily higher reasoning. It's because we're in an anxious state and we're not tuning in and we're looking for safety. Like you just pointed out this whole idea of alliances. There's so many things you touched on that I can sit there and count all the points of significance. And it is my supreme worry that people don't even understand what you're really getting at and how important all of this is. Just because I think one of the reasons I can gravitate and understand it is I've studied neuroscience, I've studied psychology, I've studied physics. I've gone into a lot of these subjects in depth and I'm like, holy shit. I am sitting there people pleasing because the unconscious biases in my primate brain are seeking to form relationships because relationships equate to survival. And right now I'm in a fear-based state because of what's going on in the world. And I would argue it's not just what's going on in the world, it's how the media, it's how social media and everything is presenting it to us. And our brains are in a fight or flight state, which is only useful literally when there's a frickin' tiger or a gun to your head. But we live in such a world where we think and feel and operate in that state almost perpetually. And I can't even consider the cellular damage that's doing.
Yeah,
So
well, it's I, the effects of cortisol alone are pretty massive, and it's increasing our cortisol. So what beyond that, I think would be hard to even know because the effects of the cortisol it pumps through our body is so damaging.
what are some of the effects that people like that I should know?
So one of the some of the things that cortisol does is that it shifts your metabolic system into storing fat. Unfortunately, into storing fat around your organs. That type of fat, especially around the heart, around the liver, creates all sorts of metabolic disease. Um, so cortisol does that. Hair loss. You may not need minoxidil. You may just need to come to terms with a lot of things that go on in life and maybe start having more intentional objectives in your life as opposed to chasing a dream because it's what you think society feels is right. I think a
Chasing
lot of
your
people,
own dream versus societal's dream. Being
yeah,
yourself, then I would say that what you're trying to say is don't be ashamed of what you are.
absolutely. And here's the thing is I'm not saying go out and go do your heart's desire. Your heart's desire might be to have a 40-hour work week at a stable company with benefits. and with predictability. Perfect.
Yeah.
I unconditional regard. I have zero problems with the life that you choose for yourself. I want you to choose the life for yourself. I want everybody to choose the life for yourself, for themselves, because I know if they're actually aware and they're actually choosing, the results will overwhelmingly be pro-social. They'll be better for everyone.
Absolutely. Uh, I like this statement. You are contribution. Who you are in truth is contribution. And I would say that don't get to thinking about that. I'm very analytical and I overanalyze and I ruminate. What it means to be who you are in truth is be whoever the hell you are. Don't second guess it. Don't think about it. Just be and allow yourself, I would argue, to be in flow state as best as you can. And directly related to this, I've often dealt with like overthinking this thing. You have the force-based emotions, and then you have what I would call powerful emotions that are more radiant, more emanating and influential in a positive light, even though both emotions are emanating from you. People are picking up on this unconsciously. What people I think oftentimes misunderstand is that this idea of developing a better mindset ought to be easy. But there is a point where what we say in force, like we talked about with the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, what we talked about myelination, you are going to resist it unconsciously in ways you don't understand that have nothing to do with the belief system, but have to do with the metabolic aspects that you don't have any conscious awareness over. So what you have to do is you do have to force it. You have to force yourself to change your mindset and you have to force yourself to embody and to act, and it's going to be uncomfortable as hell. And you have to do that in order to radiate and be at these higher levels. In this way, force is useful also because it's what you want. What do you think on that? And I know that we might, can you go over on time or do we need
Oh
to
yeah,
stop?
I can keep going. I can keep going.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I love you,
I
Toby.
got. I'm free for another actually 3 hours, so I got some time. I changing people should be less uh, overall. Don't. It's better to conceptualize it as learning instead of changing. And here's why.
Okay.
Approach life as being fully biologically based, which means that there's kind of two directions.
Okay.
There's growth or there's decay. We want as little decay as possible in our life. When we have decay, we want to root it out as quick as possible. And what we want to do is encourage growth. So if if I'm unhappy, right? We talked early on about how it starts to become okay, so you want more joy. Well, the first thing that would make sense is to first understand what creates joy. Do you even know what creates joy? And if you don't know what creates joy, well, clearly that's will have a lot of there'll be a lot of growth from that knowledge, from learning what creates joy. And then you start to see those components of different things that creates joy. One is connection to, I know some of these off the top of my head. So one of the ways that we create joy is connection to nature. Another way we create joy is having strong social bonds. Another way that we create joy is through our physical health. Another way we create joy is by experiencing high levels of competency. Now, competency could just be from a hobby, could be from just anything in your life. It doesn't have to be vocationally necessarily. Um, and and we know that we feel joy when we are making decisions for ourselves instead of having decisions made by others, right? So there's a few components of joy. I want to connect more with nature. I want to work on that. I want to make that better. So one way to go about it is I must be in nature 15 minutes a day, every day. I must sit under a tree and I must feel the tree and I must ground into the tree 15 minutes a day, every day for a year so that I can win or achieve, connect with nature. I can check that off. That's one way to go about it. It's going to be hard. It's going to be now because you've set a rule, now you've taken autonomy away from yourself. You're not making decisions now. Now you're following a rule that you set for yourself. So now you've created personal dogma. And and then why are you creating this dogma? Because you read from another source that connecting with nature is a way that you can have joy. So now it's actually an external dogma that you're putting on yourself. So instead, look at it as I'm going to learn how to make myself, I'm going to learn how to connect with nature in more ways. And so that might look like what's a way this week that you can try a new form of connecting with nature? Oh, maybe I'll go for a hike Saturday morning. And on that hike, maybe you discover a feeling, a sense, a moment where you're like, oh, okay, this is what that feels like. I've now learned how to have this experience versus I have to go do this. And now I'm focused on checking the box versus I'm trying to learn.
Yeah.
And so go about
Yeah.
it as learning and make the lessons fun. In Erickson's work on deliberate practice, he
Ooh.
said that the practice, and this is why this is important because life is learning. So how do you learn best? You learn best through practice. What type of practice creates learning? Deliberate practice is the type of practice that creates the greatest amount of learning. One of the elements of deliberate practice is that the exercises are not inherently enjoyable. That got misinterpreted as they're not fun. That was a misunderstanding that Erickson personally clarified with me, which is that
Oh,
it's kind of fun. Yeah. Which is that it's not that the athlete doesn't enjoy the activity. It's that when you're designing the activity, the lesson is what drives the design, not whether it's easy, enjoyable, or whatever that drives the design. It's the lesson that drives the design of the practice activity. So it's not inherently fun. But if you're a lacrosse player, anything you're doing with a lacrosse stick is probably fun,
I get
right?
it. I like lifting weights. It's not inherently fun to put your body through hell, but I enjoy it. I enjoy the lift.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes
So
a lot more sense.
yeah, so we want to take a deliberate practice approach to helping somebody have more joy in their life. And the low hanging fruit is, hey, you live in an apartment, you go down to your garage, you get in your car, you drive to the garage for your work, you get out of your car, you go in the elevator, you go sit in your office, you go down to the cafeteria, you eat your lunch, you go back to your office, you go back down to the garage to your car, you get in your car, you drive to the parking lot for the gym. you know, you're never outside. You're never outside.
Yeah.
So what would be a way that we could learn to create some outside time for you? How could I help you learn that? We design a practice activity that's challenging for that.
I already have one for me personally. I live right by American Fork Canyon, and I have gone up there and cold plunged. And I think that's a really good grounding exercise. But you tell me, like going up there and spending 5 minutes in a cold ass river, I think that can help quite a bit. It has multiple benefits too.
And and so what we're going to learn is how can you incorporate that in your life and does it create a connection to nature and can you notice that connection in nature making a difference in your life? And so then we're also going to reflect
Yeah.
because part of learning is reflection too. So do the activity, reflect on how it went, and then try it again.
Hmm.
Have feedback, have relative feedback. So then if we're trying to increase joy, then part of my job with you is me coming up with meaningful forms of feedback to see if joy is increasing in your life. So you get that relative feedback right away of, hey, yeah, like this is better than last week. And I have tangible evidence of this that I can see for myself. So I'm learning
I love it.
versus the like, yeah, the challenges are great to get you started, but a lot of people, they end up kind of flat afterwards. Why is that? Because you chose to join the challenge, but then you outsource choice after that. So
It
did
has to
you
be
learn?
internally developed.
So did you learn new patterns of behavior, or did you practice being under somebody else's control?
You have to practice being under your own control to develop autonomy and to develop competence, to develop confidence, to develop self-esteem.
Yeah.
And the only way to do
It's
it is to do it.
it's not that there's a right challenge that will get you there. It's that you have to learn this. You need to learn this. And to learn this, you need to develop practice activities. And those practice activities need to be in places that are at the right level of challenge for you, which means that we probably need to include psychological safety as part of that. So so on the connection with nature, what we're probably not going to do if there's also an underlying social anxiety that exists there, what we're probably not going to do is large group events. We're probably not going to do big crowded events to start.
Yeah.
And what we might do is activities that end in large group areas to just kind of learn that we can be in those situations and be okay. And why would we do it at the end? Because we know that the connection to nature happened. And so that anxious state has been able to come down. And so now as you enter into this, you're in a better psychological state to experience it as a successful experience. Now here's where like Gabor Mate and those psychologists and I differ in our backgrounds. So he's coming from a fantastic background, absolutely, and deep knowledge that I borrow from as much as I can. And my background's deep in human motivation and human learning.
Ooh.
And
To me,
so
it's more
it's
valuable than a lot of the other stuff because this actually gets to the root of how to change. Because you're
that's
motivated.
yeah,
Talk to me.
exactly. That's the thing. So he holds a lot of the keys of how do I get you to get out of your bed so you even come into my office so that I can then start helping you learn how to incorporate these things into your life, how to cultivate these things. He's on the how can you even get to my door? How can you get to a point where that trauma is no longer paralyzing for you? And that's high value and a big need for that, especially considering everything that we discussed that's been going on in the world. There's a lot of people that are going to need that. And so absolutely. But then for the non-clinical group though, how do I actually make real meaningful change in my life? I somebody with PTSD who goes for psychotherapy specific for PTSD is going to see a lot of good change in their life pretty rapidly
Yeah.
compared to um I'm a upper middle class individual with financial security I don't I don't have much joy in my life. That's a little different.
Yeah.
And so with there, it becomes understanding motivation. How do I make you want to engage in the lessons? So how do we design these practices? And what all goes into that? what makes you feel safe but challenged? Because it's got to be interesting. So I got to have some sort of interest tied there. It's got to create some, that's one of the energies that I have to design into the lesson to make it interesting for you. Or if you're trying to do this on your own, that's something you have to design for yourself. Uh, Now, from the motivation research, what makes things interesting? Well, one field on that is that you are volition. So you determine exactly how that activity within that lesson is going to take place. Instead of it being like a 50-day challenge where it's today you're going to do 100 push-ups,
You know, you
right? It's
decide,
correct.
you
I mean, it could
choose.
be, yeah, you choose. There's some choice in it. So maybe it's like do 50, maybe what would be better is it's do 50, do chess today. And
Yeah.
among chess, here's the various ways you can do chess,
I
right?
want to tap on something really quick that you hit with that volition. And this brings us back to the culture we live in. You find, for instance, that when people, just being forward, when the missionaries go and visit people, they introduce them to the Book of Mormon, and then they tell them to pray about it. And
Yeah.
that's meant to be volitional. But the underlying implicit is, oh, if you don't get this right, you got the wrong answer.
Yeah. Whereas, so,
I'm just saying there's a general culture of manipulation with volition.
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's easy to, yeah, it's, it's easy to be handed everything and then told that you pulled all that off the shelf yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like you can kind of get a lot of things put onto you thinking that you're cultivating this, but really you've had a lot of things put on you. And so then the place to start is really, and I kind of think the place for everybody to start is really with mindful awareness. And all mindful awareness is so I use mindfulness meditation to teach people how to control their focus. The reason I have people meditate is I want them learning how to switch their attention to something specific. And most of the meditations that I prescribe start with the breath, then the body, then the ears, then the thoughts, and end with the breath. So go through awareness. Go through just sensing yourself at a pretty basic level or pretty simple level, not trying to understand too much complexity, not trying to understand, you know, what your intestines might be doing right in this moment. How fast is your heart beating? It's just basic noticing because it's moving your attention system. And if you can do that, then when that bad feeling comes on, instead of it being a push that's forcing you to react, it's information that's letting you have a bigger picture other than just your visual system, other than just your auditory system. You still have both of these, and you have the heart, and you have the gut, which is really what the mirror neurons are picking up on. And the mirror neurons are picking up on the situation. They're trying to actively figure out past memories that can help predict what's going to come next. And so if you're in an anxious state, what it's going to likely say is going to come next is some loss. And so, oh my gosh, the body gets told, hey, prevent loss. Okay, let me
Yeah.
pee, please.
Question.
Versus,
Go ahead.
wait, versus, oh, huh, I'm feeling something right now. Oh, my heart rate's a bit up. Why is it up? What am I seeing? There's nothing dangerous here. I must be thinking that this person holds some key for me. Now, do you know yourself? Do people hold the key for you? Do you want people to hold the key for you? Then you get into that. What am I doing here? Why am I feeling there's a sense for loss? Who is this person? Oh, they might be able to help me get a job. I need a job. Okay. So I want to piss this person off, but also I don't need the people please.
And they're
I
going to
want
do
to,
that
I want
anyway.
to connect. I don't want to have control. I want it to be connecting.
And the only way to do that anyways is to be authentic and be internal. Like it's more self-defeating than we all realize, self included, when you are trying to get people to like you or you are trying to get some end result and you're manipulating the situation. People feel it. They don't even necessarily consciously know it, but they feel it. And something's off. To quote Joe Navarro, he's like, I've been a counter investigator for the FBI for X number of years, his whole life, basically. And he's like, as an expert, I can tell you have a 50% chance of detecting a liar, but you have a much higher probability of detecting when people are incongruent. And you feel that. And that's what you
That's,
pay attention to.
that's, and people can hide that. People can hide that when they sense that you're anxious.
Yeah. And they do hide it. They sit there and they respond, but internally, there's a different dynamic you don't see where they're like, huh, is that what you're illustrating?
Yeah. Yeah. And, and additionally, I think the other thing because I think some people are like, hey, I'm not people pleasing. I'm just trying to make everybody feel good here. Or I'm just, the how do we convince ourselves we're not people pleasing? And I would say, are you trying to get to an end result with this person? And I don't even care if you're on a sales call and obviously you're there to get an end result. You can't be at the end result. You have to be in the now. And if you're connecting, you have to be in the present. And your part of the connection is understanding how you're feeling, because that's also the energy that you're broadcasting out, whether you're consciously aware of it or not.
I love it. I love the idea of sales when people really understand it. You're not trying to convince them. You're really basically focusing on showing them what you already believe. And if
Yeah.
you don't believe it, oh, you're in deep trouble. And that goes for self advocacy. If you have to sell yourself, which we all do, you need to be your own cheerleader. You have to genuinely believe in who you are. And that's where we get back to this whole thing about it takes effort, it takes time. And I think something to illustrate that's very important here is a lot of people are like, well, that's not genuine. I'm not being genuine. I'm like, yes, you are, because it's what you genuinely want. And it has nothing to do with anyone else. It has everything to do with you. And that will come off genuine because it's a genuine expression of your desires and your goals.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I, I think what that brings to mind is really what I experienced in the whole networking culture in Utah County.
Oh boy.
Uh, it, it's a lot of instantly when you walk into those environments. I would say there's a lot of people that are instantly looking at everybody else as a means versus ends in themselves. And I'm sorry, my neighbors uh, just started, I don't know, heavy equipment use. Is that coming through on the audio? Are you all right?
Not at all. And I can also use AI to clear it out if we get it.
Oh, perfect. Good deal. Yeah, it sounds like a loud leaf blower going on my end. So I just wanted to make sure that wasn't obscured. But going back to where we were. So with in the Utah county in kind of this networking culture, you got a lot of people that are treating others as means. And how you see that manifest behaviorally is you see people um, presenting themselves as having something, but not really being clear of what that something is, and trying to not create connection, but trying to understand where's some sort of insecurity of yours that I can maybe talk to so that you're now gonna feel some sort of instant dependency on me
That's screwed up.
versus hey, wow, you you started a pest control company at the age of 22 and you're really successful now. I'm interested in you as a person.
Yes.
Oh, you run a pest control company. Is your point of sales system taking too much money from you? Right? That's how the networking groups always felt.
Yeah. It's an immediate pivot for something. Or you can even tell just when people start talking to me in a certain way, it drives me nuts. When you can tell that they're trying to use narrative or they're trying to use a style, once you've been in this environment, you know the techniques and strategies. And that's why, for one, when I do sales, like I do B2B or B2C, which I've done a lot of, I learned in my career in the first year of it that I'm like, it doesn't work to be inauthentic. You honest to God, just being straight with people, that's sales. Say, hey, I have a product. This is what I sell. Do you want it? It's that simple.
Well, and then on the bigger perspective on life, when you're
Yeah.
being authentic, when you're operating this way, how is your life? How is your quality of life?
It's low because you're incongruent. You're likely self-judging. You don't like what you're doing because you're not being genuine to who you are. And I would argue for me personally, like to be very direct with you, this gets personal. When I, for instance, in my short stint of being LDS, I did it and I literally just wanted to die because it felt so inauthentic to who I really was. And I felt stubborn and wrong for how I felt. But I felt like I would rather die than do this. This isn't me. This isn't true. And I have these voices in my head saying, you're just being obstinate. You're actually naturally evil. And the reason you feel this way is because there's something innately wrong with you. When in reality, there's nothing wrong with me. Being who I am is who I'm meant to be, or else I wouldn't exist.
Yeah, exactly. And so I would say in these networking situations, what I feel is going on, because I've been on the other end where it is the person trying to figure out what can they sell me.
Yeah.
You, one of the things salespeople say is don't ever smell desperate for the sale. Don't smell hungry.
Yeah.
Don't smell needy. Don't look needy. Don't feel needy. Don't feel these things. And a lot of times, what I can tell is when people are treating others as means, they're not sensing in themselves that anxiety or fear or whatever it is that's making them compulsively act the way they act in these settings.
I agree. You have to become self-aware.
And I was working with I work with a professional mountain biker, and I was working with him the other day. And what we were working on specifically was when you're heading out to the track, when you're heading to the start of the course, and something comes up, indulge that thought, go through that feeling. So you have that fear, go through that feeling,
Yeah.
sense that fear, but then listen to it and ask it, why am I feeling fear right now? Why is this fear justified? What are the reasons that are justified? And what are the things that those justified reasons, what are the things that that's going to push me to do? And of those things that that's going to push me to do, what are those things I actually want to do? I'm not saying the fear is wrong or right. I'm not saying the fear has good information or bad information. I'm saying the fear has information. Now you need to listen to it. If you want it to be non-effective, if you want it to not affect you negatively, you have to listen to it, understand it. Because what I can't give you is something that'll make the fear not affect you. If you're feeling it, you're feeling it. It's there until it's not there anymore. We have drugs that can make emotions go away. That's about it. And most of those drugs, they make the emotion go away and they make most conscious thought go away too. They're sedatives and make you go to sleep. So it so that fear is always going to be there. You have to coexist with it, not try to get rid of it because it's bad. The absolute thinking that we talked about at the beginning of the episode, that's that's where that becomes a huge roadblock. I can't allow myself to feel fear because fear is bad. Versus I feel afraid. Why am I afraid? What of this fear is rational? So some of the fear will disappear because you realize what part's not rational. Not all of it. Some of the irrational fear is going to stay, of course. Um, it's chemical signals. Those don't just disappear like that. It's not a light switch. It's a chemical, it's electrochemical reaction. So it takes time. Things have
Yeah.
half-lives. Feelings have half-lives on them. And so you got to just then really face it and give into the curiosity of it and then understand it. Hey, this is going to make me jump to trying to make a sale right away. And what I actually want to do is make connection because I've given away 100 business cards and I've actually not gone to lunch with anybody for a couple weeks.
That's important.
I'm not connecting.
Absolutely.
Fear is getting in my way because I'm afraid I'm not having as good of a life as I could. I want to have a better life. I want to have more joy in my life.
So to clarify here with what you're saying, if I'm still understanding this correct, because I tend to get inside my own head quite a bit. What you're illustrating is you're not saying to try and get rid of the emotion, be curious with it, but let's say you're also trying to cultivate a different mindset. You still actively push that mindset, but you don't try to resist what's going on internally. You just instead indulge the mindset while recognizing and not resisting what's going on. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. And I would say less than indulging the mindset, you're experiencing the emotion. You're instead of trying to deny the emotion and you're experiencing it in a way in which you're actively asking yourself, why is this emotion here? You're trying to understand that. What might be the source of it? Not why is it here? What might be the source? I'm in a crowded room of people. That's all you need to know. If that's the source that you can get to, I'm not saying you need to go all the way and label yourself and diagnose yourself as having social anxiety. I'm feeling fear. I think it's because there's a large room of people that I'm entering into. Okay. What what is that fear going to make me want to do? It's going to make me want to find a corner of the room and hide. Okay, but why are you going to this event then? Because I want to try to create some human connection, right? So this is the inner dialogue I want going on in the parking lot, in the car, while you're waiting to head on in, right? But what is my goal? To make connection. How could I make connection? I could try to introduce myself to somebody. Doesn't matter who. Let's find somebody. I remember working with my therapist or my coach or whoever, and they said, find somebody who's non-threatening to me. Okay, I'll just walk in, I'll just look. There'll be somebody non-threatening there because I see some of the people walking around from the parking lot. I clearly these people look kind of safe to talk to. And then that's it. If I do that, perfect. I took the step. I engaged. I'm good. I don't need to criticize or try to control for anything beyond that. I want to make this one instance. I want to feel this one piece of success and see what happens from there. Because the other thing I don't want the lesson to be so big that it becomes intimidating. If it's, I have to do this 50 times over an hour and a half, that feels intimidating. Right. And so that's that awareness that people would go through. Right. Maybe the problem is that you're like, damn, I just talk too much in all these events. I want to listen more. I want to become a better listener. So
Yeah.
then maybe the prep in the car is I want to really remember that I want to ask questions to people.
Yeah.
And I know what happens in these events. I get a little anxious and people ask me a question and I just start talking and then I feel a little nervous. And so I forget to ask a reciprocal question back. Speaking from personal experience there. And so then it's like, hey, remember to ask reciprocal questions. Just be intentional about that.
Yeah. Where do you like this is, I think you're touching on it now, but let's talk about these instances, like you say, for social anxiety, because it's so common. Visualization, practicing. My instant thought is Michael Phelps. But what kind of role does this play in this process?
Yeah. So it's, I look at it, I take the perspective that life is about growth and growth is about learning and learning is about being intentional in that. Now you're going to learn in all sorts of places, but prioritizing learning, being intentional that learning is growth and that I want to learn. So some bigger things, bigger concepts that have to be internalized over a long run on that. One is that I have to be okay with making mistakes. Errors are inherent in any learning process, and I'm okay with errors. Meaning I'm okay with disappointing other people at times too. There are certain ways I'm not going to disappoint people. So not following through would be a bad disappointment, would be a disappointment I'm wanting to avoid. That would be a disappointment that doesn't show growth or learning to me. Counter to my goal, not good or bad, but counter to my goal. Whereas mistakes, I misunderstood or what I delivered was not what they were anticipating. Or I said something that turned out to be offensive unintentionally. I can learn. I can grow. That's, there's lessons from those mistakes I can gain. Misunderstanding. Oh, I'm assuming that this knowledge is common and it really isn't. I'm assuming I could use the word autonomy and people would understand what I mean. How silly. I understand that. Personal choice as opposed to choice that's obligated by religious beliefs, parental beliefs, whatever it is. And start speaking that way instead of saying autonomy, right?
Yeah.
And so it's so that on the deep, I don't know if I'm going too much in the weeds here on this, but that on
No.
the deeper level of understanding, okay, holistically, if I want to make this life change, I need to practice. I need to figure out what are the components that would create this new life. I'm going to start living it now, but I'm going to experience it at a much higher level then because there's a lot I need to cultivate and accrue between where I am now and where I want to be. What's not going to need to change are the values that I live by. So am I going to choose autonomy over harmony? because values conflict in a lot of ways.
They do.
And when we say here's the right values for everyone, then that's what morals are to me. That's
I
when it
agree.
becomes morals. And I would say no, the morals can't exist. And we can have an orderly society without morals. People have values and are clear about their values. Then we can live with a society that doesn't need to have a common moral system that we war over determining whose moral system is right or wrong.
And I think this requires a lot of willingness too. For instance, a lot of time I value harmony a lot, but I don't value it because it's what I value. I value it because I fear the result of being autonomous, but my actual desire is autonomy. And
Yeah,
people become cognizant of that.
absolutely. And so on the bigger level too is really defining these concepts for yourself too. One of the crazy things I read a neuroscience paper that showed um, with 7 billion people on the world, there are 7 billion different ideas of what the color blue is.
Hmm.
We None of us see blue the same. None of us see any color the same because of the uniqueness in our neurology. It's very unlikely that any of us see any one color the same. My green is different than your green. I have to fundamentally, as a practitioner now, really understand the full magnitude of that. That I can't even say green and mean the same thing to you.
Yeah.
There's going to be just a slight offset of our understanding. The picture is already blurred just on something as simple as that.
Allowing people to be different. And I think a lot of times, you correct me if I'm wrong, we don't allow people to be different because we don't allow ourselves to be unique.
Exactly. Hey, I'm sacrificing my identity to conform to this, and I hate this. Could you do that? I need you to do that too.
I found myself projecting that as a member of the LDS faith. I sacrificed my own identity and I had the expectation that everyone else should be doing it along with me. And I see a lot of times, sorry about that. I see that a lot of times in people and I see it in myself. I've caught myself now as it being in my relationship for the past 4 years. There are things that I do that I have had to become very self-aware of and recognize this is inappropriate. I think that a good articulation of this was the book No More Mr. Nice Guy. And even though I don't like everything he writes, his idea of what we call covert contracts. We have these
Yeah,
secret assumptions about relationships, and we need to break those apart and be very real with ourselves and be very real with others. And that does require a lot of practice.
absolutely. And willingness to experience uncomfortable emotions. Breaking those, bringing those contracts to light and making those from covert to overt within your relationship,
Yes.
especially a romantic relationship.
Yes.
It's not going to always be a happy, friendly conversation. Sometimes it's going to be a very volatile conversation.
Yeah.
And willingness to experience that
Yeah.
because it's just an emotion. Why am I angry? Because this is challenging my perspective of reality. How is it challenging my perspective of reality? Well, it's making me feel conflict on these core beliefs I have. Okay, what do you want to do with that? Do you want to drop your core beliefs or is this relationship toxic for you? A lot of people say, I want to keep my core belief and this toxic relationship and make it work. Good luck. I guess joy can get thrown out the window. Let's quit that search.
And I think flipping it on its head a little bit, because I've done this myself, recognize when you're the toxic one and recognize why. Because I would argue that a lot of us are more toxic than we realize because we come from toxic backgrounds and we have to become self aware like, oh, if you were traumatized, just as an example, from an abusive individual, understand that that's how you learned to communicate. And you need to be aware that that's unhealthy. And you not need to shame yourself. Like you said, take it as growth, take it as error. I really like the Hindu approach, to be very frank. There is no sin as the way the Hindus see it. There's error, but the whole idea of life is to self actualize and to grow and grow in that actualization, understand it's a process over time. And then becoming aware of your errors. I don't like a lot of words we use, like, for instance, toxic, even though that's accurate rendition. A better way to look at it is like, look, you have these behaviors and these patterns that are maladaptive. They're not producing the results you want, and they are hurting other people. Therefore, become aware of them and alter them. So, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that you can only change the part that's you. You can only be responsible for the part that's you. That's really that's the hard part in those situations is is the is the relationship toxic, or is it, wait, let's get out of simple labels and into more detail, and let's not shorthand. I feel smothered in this relationship, and I feel like I consistently make choices that are not the choices I would make if I were not in this relationship.
Ooh, I think that you can easily pivot that to any business relationship, any friendship. And you have to understand all of this is the more you look at how to be multimodal to go with AI, the better,
Yeah,
because you're going to start seeing it. And it's like you said, that practice something small in one area and it will proliferate. It will. And that's something you need to be aware of. The same goes for negative beliefs. Negative beliefs self perpetuate, positive beliefs self perpetuate. This is just one rendition, but patterns self perpetuate.
absolutely, absolutely. And there's and then learn. I think to pull in the idea of learning on top of that to kind of fully conceptualize this, learning is measured by two things. One is retention, and the other is transfer. Retention, can you repeat the task at the level we trained you to at a much future date? 6 weeks, 6 months, 2 years. Can you repeat that? Did you retain? Transfer. Can you create the same results if I change the starting conditions?
That's a big one.
And so, am I able to be less reactive to fear and more self aware, which will make me more authentic because I'm choosing the decisions that reflect what I want in life versus what I anticipate is the right thing to do according to dogmatic standards that exist as just structures in my life.
Absolutely. I think that becoming aware of those is so important. I wish people, self included, like, I'm aware of them, but acting on them is so much more difficult. And I would even argue that being aware of them is a very big hurdle for most people. Like, how are you being dogmatic on yourself? For instance, I believe there's a certain way of being. I need to perform. I need to have these things happening in my life in a certain way. That's dogma. It, and this is hard. This is very hard. I'm about to say, the more you can let go and be in the present and live in uncertainty, as we want to put it, the better. And it's not even uncertainty so much as you're not paying attention to the future because your brain's not meant for that. It's only using past memories, and we know those are bad, especially if you want to grow.
Exactly. Because they're inaccurate. Your past memories are inaccurate. Your past memories lack the details necessary for them to be truly effective as guides.
Yes. And I think
That's,
you once said beyond 5 years, they're basically crap,
yeah, yeah,
which a lot of us, and this is hard for me even, just because you have a recollection of it does not mean it's accurate. And I remember the Memory Illusion was a book I read once, and it specifically says you have to understand when you're recalling a memory, you're recalling your previous recollection. And to think of it this way, you're only recalling very specific pieces, and those pieces aren't accurate. And then your brain's restructuring the memory off of those pieces, somewhat like an MP3. There's a lot of data that's missing, but in this case, it's a lot of important data
yeah.
based off of your current emotion or the emotion when you stored it. That's how you recall it. And I would like to say, in addition to that, that people don't understand, and maybe you can correct me on this, but your recollection of memories has a lot to do with your current mindset and your current emotional state, meaning the memories you recall even are directly related to your current emotions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because that's part of the memory trigger. The, um, the, the idea that we can really know what the past was, and the idea that we can really know everything that's influencing us now. I, I think it's we have a built-in bias as humans to believe that we can, to
Uh,
believe that that exists as a reality, to believe that memories exist like YouTube videos. A lot of people, even though they know that's not true, then when you see how they use the concept of memories, they act as if it is though still YouTube in their brain, and they can just replay the video and remember everything about it. And it's let's think about it like that YouTube video is stored uh, states on a microprocessor or on a hard drive ultimately. So it's stored energy states on a hard drive.
yeah,
For a human mind, it's it's biological. Uh it's not a hard drive. It's it's tissue.
it's plastic.
It's plastic. It's blood and skin, and it's tissue. It's like gum, it's more like your mouth than it is a computer in reality. And so the concept of how it stores is different, right? Because memories are stored kind of throughout the brains, kind of in dendrites, kind of, it's like really, memories really hard to explain and hard to conceptualize on the cellular level of what's going on there, of how it actually works. So it's a different type of encoding of information
Yeah,
than how YouTube works. So
absolutely.
when
And
you
there's a lot of
retrieve
them.
it, you're going to get different information out because you're storing it differently. So you can't compare it to the two. So people need to get over the idea that I remember my past accurately. No, you don't.
No, and that's a problem for me. I can sit here and transparently admit it and then recognize what I want to do. And what I want to do is just move forward and let it go, live in the moment. And this is where I want to ask you something. I want you to continue your thought. Then I have a very key question I think is important to address, but go ahead.
Oh yeah. So if your past needs to be addressed, yeah, that's where psychotherapy really works. What I've found in my training though, it's less about changing or being accurate and really understanding what that past was. It's modifying the relationship with that memory. And when they say we're modifying the relationship with that memory, what they're really saying is they're modifying how you use that memory to predict your future.
Absolutely. I think a really good way for me, for instance, is I've told this to you before. I have a memory that I have never let go of, where I found myself as a young child, where my father lost his crap. My father was bipolar, and he essentially threatened my mom. He said to her directly, he's like, "You've got to pick. It's either me or that selfish little SOB." And what I internalized at the time is that because my mom asked my dad to stay, that I have no one and that I'm worthless. And standing up for myself is going to get me rejected. What I really can learn from that and re-articulate it is, how is this for me? And I choose, I have to be volitional. I have to choose what that means. And in the case, how I've chosen to interpret it is, well, he was a jerk. And what I really realized is that standing up for myself is exactly what I needed to do, because it helped reveal the situation. Even though it didn't go my way, it made it very clear who was for me and who was not for me. And even though that's a harsh environment and the child can't comprehend it or deal with it, and I can't even remember my mind as a kid, I know that I was heavily indoctrinated to see myself as the villain in these situations. And I also know that the theme of the time was to villainize children, because it's far easier to villainize children. And like we talked about in brief, ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, or these other issues. And I've seen other friends do this to their own kids. They see, oh, they're oppositional, oh, they're defiant. I'm like, it's not a reflection of them. People have innate systems of self-protection built in, and it's not oppositional. It is them being like, I do not trust you. And there's good reason for it. And I didn't trust my parents, and there was good reason for it. And that's how I reframe that. And I can learn that this is something for me because it taught me not to be less confident. It taught me to be more confident, to rely more on my gut, not less.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? And then I guess well, we'll go there. And I still have my question.
Yeah. So, so one of the things that's important is that with that memory, you understand for yourself, hey, it's okay to choose to stand up for myself when I know I'm feeling like I'm being attacked and I feel like I'm being scapegoated. It's okay to stand up for myself when I am in pursuit of a goal, and standing up for myself is how I keep moving forward. As opposed to, I need to make a rule that I always stand up for myself. Anytime I feel slighted, I'm going to stand up for myself.
Yeah.
One is, I understand when I feel this way, I feel attacked. And if I am being attacked, I'm going to choose to stand up for myself. I'm going to make sure I notice that that's what's going on, and I'm going to choose to put in the energy to engage. The other is, I'm changing my reflex from I feel this, I'm going to withdraw, to I feel this, I'm going to attack.
One is they're both dogmatic.
We don't want to, what we don't want to do is just switch a, one mindless response with another. Instead, what we want to do is we want to understand, hey, wait, I think when I feel this way, the information that I want to interpret is it's okay to choose to defend myself now. Okay, this is the time to pause and to see if I'm being attacked. Maybe when I feel this way, I want to get clarification from the person I'm talking to.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. So if it's your wife, then it's wait a minute. I want to develop the habit of when I feel this way of asking, wait a minute, hey, I'm feeling attacked right now. And I'm trying to understand why I'm feeling attacked. And I want you to know I'm feeling attacked and I'm trying to understand this. And I don't want to be reactive, but I'm feeling attacked. And so I'm feeling reactive.
Yeah.
And I'm
And
in
I
a
think
pause
it's not being
moment.
ashamed of that response too.
Yeah, I'm not afraid to tell you that I'm feeling attacked because
And
I
then
don't
don't be
tell
afraid of their
myself that.
reaction.
Yeah, exactly. If it's some random person on the street, I'm feeling attacked by this person. Then it's maybe a different math. Then maybe it's how long am I even going to be around this person? They're yelling at me from across the street. It's a person going through a psychotic episode. I'm not going to engage,
Yeah.
right?
Like you said, be volitional. And I think that's really hard for all of us. And this is hard for me, but the more you engage volitionally, the more you're going to strengthen your brain. And it's always going to require effort. But you're going to be somebody who, in my opinion, Jordan Peterson tries to illustrate, you become dangerous in a good way. And in this modern age, that is absolutely vital. You need to be intellectually dangerous. And that doesn't necessarily mean well read. It means you need to be an opponent that when people come up against you, they recognize you're cognitively powerful.
Yeah. You're not, yeah. You're able to understand your feelings as opposed to being persuaded by your feelings.
Yes. So this brings me to my question. How important is how important is self-esteem or confidence? And I know they're somewhat different, but how important do you feel they are in your practice for people to achieve?
Self-esteem is vital. Self-esteem being defined as a belief in your ability to make decisions that are best for you and be willing to choose those decisions, even when those decisions are the hard decisions.
Very much
So
context dependent too.
that's the
I
tough
word.
part, is making the decisions that are best for you when they're the hard decisions to make.
Keyword, this isn't easy. And people need to understand that. Anything worthwhile isn't easy.
And
That's
and
just
so absolutely. And so what does self-esteem come from? One element of self-esteem is this concept of self-efficacy, which is a belief that you can put energy into the goals you have in life and and that you'll actually accomplish them, that you can control your destiny in these areas of your life. It's not a universal concept. It's a concept for the goal pursuits that you have in life. That's one form of self-esteem. Another form that's one element of self-esteem.
yeah.
The way you talk to yourself,
There you go.
your
And that's
self-talk
training.
is another element of self-esteem. That's a really trainable element.
Yeah. I'd argue it's a really powerful one too that a lot of people don't capitalize on. I remember when I got divorced from my ex-wife, she was going through her psychology degree, and one thing she said she learned that was powerful for her is every time she said something negative about herself, she said two positive things. And I think that's a very good way to reflect on that and override it. And I think we got to be careful though. What a lot of people don't understand is don't go overboard, because the moment you go overboard and try to find things, your brain will bias itself to not being able to find sufficient things. And then it's going to be counterproductive, which is a nuance to that. But you go on like this whole thing with confidence when people don't have this self esteem. It's like we've said, and I want you to tell me if I'm wrong, practice it. Practice what self esteem feels like, practice what it thinks like, and do it to the best of your ability flamboyantly or confidently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the, what, so then it becomes what is the ideal practice environment for you for working on that level of self-esteem, right? For some people, maybe it's some form of assertiveness training. And that could look like you're going to you're going to go to a deli and make a difficult order,
I love it.
right?
That's hard
It, and then and that's really what I'm looking for. Why is it hard?
because it's pushing your comfort zone. It's pushing what you do, and you're trying to do something you don't do because that's the whole point.
So this is a commercial business
Yeah.
that is seeking to sell sandwiches, and
Yeah.
you're actually paying a premium because you're making your sandwich more customized. So you're going to give them more money for this. So I'll ask again, what makes this difficult now?
I see what you're saying. I think what makes this difficult is if you're not, for me, what would make this difficult is I don't want to put them out. Even though I'm paying for it, I still don't want to put them out. I don't want to inconvenience them. I don't want them not to, I guess ultimately, I don't want them not to like me.
Now, are you betraying a value of yours by having a sandwich that is the exact sandwich you want?
Am I betraying it by getting the exact sandwich I want?
Are you betraying any of your values?
No,
Now, assuming that you're going to a deli that pays its employees, that isn't using slave labor, they're paid by the hour. They're not paid on commission based upon number of sandwiches. They're paid by the hour. So is asking them to work on your sandwich violating any personal value of yours?
no,
So then just taking whatever sandwich they give you would be inauthentic, correct?
correct. 'Cause it's not what you really want and it goes against your values.
So what makes this hard is that you felt this created conflict with who you want to be. But does it create conflict with who you want to be if you're to do this exercise? Or does it let you experience you being authentic in a small way, in a brief moment?
And it lets you experience being authentic in a small way. And that
And
adds up.
so what's hard is the decision to be authentic versus conformist.
Like you said, self-esteem. It's making the hard decisions and recognizing. I think what you're trying to say, and tell me if I'm wrong, is self-esteem, just they're hard decisions. It's not like you feel good or it's easy to make these hard decisions. Self-esteem is a choice, and it's a constant choice, a volitional choice to choose yourself. And then to choose that this is not a negative thing, but it's actually the best thing for yourself. And it shouldn't, it doesn't need to consider other people. And that's a really hard thing societally because it's thrust down our throats. You're not a bad person for putting yourself first. And I'm not going to add any but consider other people because I feel like that's the knee jerk reaction that we all put in. And I'm like, no, the answer is put yourself first, trust the process, no other questions.
And we went through the process of identifying, are you violating your values? And you know you're not,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
because of that step, is there good or bad in ordering a sandwich that way?
No, it just is. I would argue ordering it that way for the context of your values is a good thing, and not ordering it that way is a bad thing in reference to what you want to achieve in your goals.
Because if you can't even be authentic in ordering a sandwich at lunch, how are you going to be authentic with your spouse? And if you want to have a long-term relationship that has growth for both people in it, when you add your values as part of being authentic, are you inherently dangerous or harmful then? I would say no,
No,
because there's conscientiousness that's occurring in your decisions. Conscientiousness isn't people pleasing. Conscientiousness is just realizing that yes, you are you and you're autonomous and you deserve to express your authentic self. And part of your authentic self exists in a society with others. I can wear green hair. I can't make everybody else's hair green,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's that concept. If my green hair offends you, that's not my problem.
absolutely.
And what value am I violating by having green hair? None. So, you know, I mean, it's, there's a fear of being authentic. And inherent in that fear is this idea that because our society, our culture is so rooted in Christianity, there's this idea that we're inherently flawed, that we need to repent consistently because we're born sinners, right? There's good and there's evil.
Yeah,
Satan is constantly trying to tempt you. Uh-uh.
such
There is,
an important structure.
yeah, we are inherently pro-social when we are aware of
Bingo.
outcomes.
I love that. I just want to hit that. We are inherently pro-social. And when I talk about this is we inherently move towards love when we are safe humans. And that means cooperation, getting along. And there is so much misinterpretation. I even think, well, I don't think Jordan Peterson, obviously Christian, and he has this dogmatic approach. He has that mindset. And I think it's a detriment to him honestly, in his work. He's a very powerful mind, but you can tell the man is driven by a lot of his anxious thoughts and feelings in the development of his, what do I want to, severity, the best way I would put it. And you can see it trickle through every single thing he teaches. I was actually listening to 12 Rules yesterday, and I was like, I can only handle so much of him. Like, I love him. He is articulate. He is deadly. And for that, I enjoy him. But beyond that, I can only take so much of his bluntly negativity towards a lot of human nature, which I think is largely unfounded. And I think, for instance, people don't recognize, for instance, our primatology research is heavily biased. For instance, our primate studies on chimpanzees, one of the biggest things we didn't even recognize in the research where we screwed it up is we took their food source and we put it in a single location. You've instantly created scarcity and you've created a serious problem that doesn't show how primates normally behave when they're secure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
Yeah. And Jordan Peterson's perspectives are largely based upon him being trained as a classic psychoanalyst. Psychoanalysis is really the therapy for the elite. And here's why. Psychoanalysis is typically done it takes multiple years, usually multiple sessions a week. And with somebody who is trained at a level that generally those hour-long sessions range between $200 to $500 an hour. The cost of psychoanalysis puts it to really kind of the elite wealth in the nation.
how many
And
sessions a week are we looking at here? Like two, three?
like it's 2 to 3 sessions a week going on for 3 to 5 years at a time to really get deep into uh, full on change. The majority of that time it's just the client talking, responding to small questions, doing pre-association, just kind of or just sitting there in silence. The analyst kind of takes up a lot of data and then provides powerful insight after a period of time has come on to say, I see this. Um, and that's why the number and frequent sessions are so important because you have to see patterns, which requires a lot of interaction for actual patterns to emerge, for you to know that those patterns are real and to really understand what those patterns are truly, all the intricacies of them.
Interesting.
And so because of that, then the science is based upon those people that can engage in that type of therapy. So his worldview in part is created from a perspective that's a very small portion of the people on the planet. And so I
Absolutely.
think, and where I take fault with Jordan Peterson in particular is that, yeah, there's elements of dogma that he has that are just, he brings absolutes and I'm a absurdist. So in my, philosophical way of viewing life and a critical realist and my idea of the knowledge of nature and my epistemology, which is that there is a reality, but we can't actually see that reality because the human mind creates a veil over what we can actually see. In addition, we've technologized the world so much that there actually is a natural world left for us to experience. There's wild areas, but there's not nature as it once was, as we evolved with, in ancient times. And so what that means is that we can see structures of reality, but only portions of the structure. And we can kind of feel it, but we can never fully understand it. And that structure that we see will change and be occluded from us. And so how does that reality exist? The replication issues that we see. It's not just because the science back then wasn't as good as it is today. It's also because nature changes. And what was true 20 years ago clearly is not going to be true today, especially in human behavior. This creates a tremendous change to how we live and behave. It was hugely transformative. It's changed the way we communicate. It's changed the way we gather information. It changes what we care about as a society. It changes how we care as a society. It's created divisions that didn't exist in society because now our divisions can exist across great geographies instead of our divisions being based upon geography.
Yeah.
Huge transformations in humankind. And then we're adding AI into this too. So now we have the ability to access knowledge and access information in a way that's fully unprecedented at a level that's just unreal.
Yeah.
It's going to be transforming. So what we know is, and so what I'm saying is what we know is fact today won't be fact in 2030. We should already anticipate that the, and not that smoking will be good for you in 2030. More of the pressures that create smokers is going to be different in 2030. The antecedents that lead to smoking, the triggers that make people into smokers will be different in 2030 than it is today. This reality won't exist then.
And I would argue we don't really know what all this has done. You pointed out your iPhone. We have no idea what the long-term implications are, but from what we're seeing, it's oh shit, this isn't good. And I think
Or
one of the systemic aspects that we're seeing now is this culture of, you and I just talked about this in depth, that we need to be more internal about how we approach things. But there are so many people that are requiring other people to accept them. And it's asinine. It can't work and it never will.
yeah, I absolutely. I think there's then it goes. I think with that stuff, it goes back to being deep in the value, deep in your own personal values. So if the way somebody else lives is causing you to experience negative emotion. It goes back to the idea of self-awareness. Okay, what is that negative emotion telling you? Is that person doing something that's directly affecting you? If so, that's a whole different thing. Are they touching you? Are they messing with your ability to make your livelihood? What is it that they're doing that's actually affecting you?
Yeah.
And if that's not there, then okay, now it's fully your problem. Why does that create negative emotion in you? Because if you want to be autonomous in your choice, the hard thing is you have to accept other people being autonomous in their choice too. If you want how you live to be okay, people's weird, that makes you uncomfortable, but that's the limit of how it affects you, is it
Yeah.
makes you uncomfortable. That has to be okay as well.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest problems right now with the conservative side is that no one is okay with the liberal side's current decisions and choices. And it's just as bad as the other side. I'm like, we have to have a meeting of the minds where, for instance, the huge trans community that's growing now, just allow people live and let live. If they're not allowing you to live, that's okay. You still have a choice. You can still be kind and you can let it go. It's not directly impacting you unless they are forcing you to speak in a particular way, which is totalitarian and that is problematic.
Yeah. But I think, but it's more the, I see with, with trans is first off, do we want to tell people, do we want to say that there is a right, correct way to parent? I would argue we definitely don't want that. We know
No,
there's things that we don't want within parenting. Um, we don't want sexual assault. We don't want physical abuse. We don't want verbal abuse. We don't want emotional abuse. I would argue that we're not very good on, there's not much agreement on the emotional and verbal abuse, what is and what isn't on those. So I would say those right there, we're out of consensus.
yeah,
So another reason why definitely we want parents to choose, not laws to choose.
absolutely.
And I I fundamentally think it's best for society to allow allow parents to raise kids that and to take the risk that that creates.
Absolutely. We can't take that away. Uh, and that's part of like treat a person like a king, give them autonomy, trust in them. It's the query of the founding fathers of the United States is this ultimate thing. Do you trust the people or not? I'm like, you take a risk on people, whether you like it or not. If you don't, you're going to create another hierarchy of control. And we've seen historically what that's done for us. Let's try something new.
And every every child has trauma and issues from their parenting. Best families to the most chaotic families. All childhood doesn't leave you unscathed. Childhood doesn't parenting is never absolute great or absolute terrible. In fact, in the measures of when they're looking at how frequently do you need to have positive interactions with your child, 60% of the time is what creates humans that are capable of having uh, um, stable connections with other humans that fall into that the good category of relationships that aren't avoidant or anxious or any of the other combos, right? That are able to stably attach to others. Takes
Yes.
60% of the time of being conscientious, uh, concerned. So 40% of the time you can kind of be checked out on the phone, not really neglectful or moody or whatever, and it's going to be okay. We're that resilient as individuals. So then it's even more. Why not why not let the parents know their kid and let the parents raise their kid? And if that kid's messed up as an adult, we'll deal with it then. But trying to control parents will create a lot more messed up adults. And so let's trust the population to know how to parent. Let's let let's assume that humans are innately capable,
Yeah,
and let's not worry about it.
absolutely. And
Let's
whether you like
focus.
Spock or not, that's something he teaches is you have the innate capability to parent your child. Trust your gut.
Yeah,
Um, you've talked to a lot of things, Toby, and I admit I want to try to set something up again in the future just because you're a wealth of knowledge and people need to know who you are and what you offer. And it was something I could see with this, and I don't know how you feel about it, but there are people that need to hear from you that we could do a session opportunity where they are, if they're willing to be vulnerable and open about it, a discussion. And then a lot of general issues that people are facing, this would be an opportunity for them to work with you and people to recognize how this whole process breaks down. Even today, as we talked, a lot of these issues are very personal to me. And you know that, like, it's going to be innate that someone talks to something they're concerned about and they're going to ask questions related to themselves.
absolutely. That would be fantastic. I think that'd be a great way to, yeah, I would love that. Especially I know in your network, there's some really interesting people too that probably would be like, hey, I want to dip my toes into this.
Yeah.
This is challenging and scary, and I want to do this.
Absolutely. And I'm going to broadcast that very wide with this, with the newsletter I'm going to put together from our conversation and as well the podcast and use snippets using some AI tools that you may or may not be interested in the future. But well, let's see what we can do with this to garner some attention and then probably put a call to action out there for people interested. I've got a few people that I would be more than interested in having them work with you. One in particular, I would love to do an interview with, and he's a formidable human being. His name is Stephen Huff. He is the director of the MBA program over at UVU. And I think we briefly discussed something that he's trying to figure out. How do you measure critical thinking? And I would argue that we have largely alluded to it today. It's this concept of self-reflective mindfulness and getting serious about noticing the noticing, to put it
Yeah.
lightly. But
Metacognition, really that
cognition.
ability to see your thoughts as thoughts, as opposed to your thoughts are you telling you who you are.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people need to hear that back a few times to really understand it. And really, what I'm saying is that your thoughts can dictate who you are. Your thoughts can dictate how you move through the world every single day of your life. Or your thoughts can be part of the whole you. And some of your thoughts dictate what goes on through your day. And a lot of your thoughts are just like a lot of your breaths. They're just part of the day. They aren't necessarily the critical moment. They're just part of the biological process of living.
They naturally percolate up based off of potentials. You have electrical, magnetic potentials, biochemical processes that are taking place based off of historical interactions with the environment. And you are following probabilistic curves. And this doesn't, I'm not even talking about whether or not a person has a soul at this point. That's irrelevant. What we do know is this is an aspect of how you operate. And when we talk about your thinking, be volitional. You have thoughts that are automatic. And then when you're volitional, you have new thoughts that where you're actively autonomous and becoming an autonomous agent. And that is your thoughts are still dictating who you are, but now you're choosing your thoughts. You're choosing how you're responding to the automatic responses and not allowing them to dictate your behavior without consideration, which, like we said, this is hard.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Not just using the cerebellum, but also, or the frontal cortex, but using the vagal nerve as well. Uh,
Illustrate what you mean by that. Like, do
so the
you mean
vagal
physical
nerve,
control of your breathing?
yeah. So there's Stephen Porges was the MD that originally created the polyvagal theory. The idea that we have this vagus nerve so there's one nerve that connects our major organ centers into the brain. And that really is the source of the sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system. Information travels in both directions, from the brain down and from the organs up. So the brain isn't the only part of our conscious processing system,
And that's hard for people to wrap their head around.
because our stomach and the bacteria in our stomach drives the brain. Depression can be cured sometimes, not always, not all depressions, but some depressions are caused by gut bacteria. And those depressions can be cured by fixing the gut bacteria. So we know for a fact that your brain can experience depression because of your gut.
So that's one aspect. What about your heart?
Absolutely. So people with the heart as well, when it's racing, it it can dictate norepinephrine being released. Your heart your heart can send signals up that can, what is it? I think it's the hypothalamus. I can't remember which, but can hit that part of the brain that then signals down to the endocrine system to release norepinephrine.
How do
Right?
we consciously balance these things?
Your lungs can detect toxins in the air. Do you see the smoke or smell the smoke first? And if you smell the smoke first, what's your reaction? Probably a lot more alert than if you see the smoke first.
Yeah.
Probably if you smell the smoke, probably the first thing you're doing is looking for the smoke. The smoke's picked up in your lungs and your olfactory areas, not in your brain.
And
That's
it's
a
process that.
sensory into the brain, causing the brain to react, telling the brain, hey, make the eyes scan for fire and smoke. So your thoughts aren't all of your consciousness, is what I'm saying. Realize that consciousness exists outside of one single organ.
I see what you're saying.
That when you start to allow for that within your conception of self, now those thoughts aren't identity. Those thoughts are elements of the whole self.
I think related to that, you're lightly touching on is, am I happy because I sing, or do I sing because I'm happy?
Yes, sometimes, absolutely.
Hmm.
Sometimes you're happy, so you sing, and sometimes you're singing because you're happy, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes the song creates the happiness, sometimes the happiness creates the song.
And it's like you're saying, it's a complex interplay that a lot of people don't recognize. And you are really focused on, to summarize here in the end, you really focus on helping people develop autonomy and volition in their lives. And you start with becoming mindful. You develop these meditations to help people. And that's only one small prong of what you do, but it's integral. It's like what Bruce Lee said, I fear the man who practiced one punch 10,000 times versus knows like 10,000 punches, right? It's knowing the very basics that produce the highest results.
Absolutely. And it follows all sorts of theory. I mean, deliberate practice is figure out figure out what's going to have the highest results with the least amount of effort. That's really one of the when you use a deliberate practice framework for skill development, it really is simply get get the low hanging fruit first. Work your way up the tree. Don't bring out the ladders and start at the top. Harvest from the bottom up.
Okay.
And and so that's why I start with mindfulness. Sense the body. You probably are out of touch with your body's sense. I was talking to somebody who works for a major bank, and what she was telling me is it's crazy right now. When I go to work, people sit at their desk for 8 hours. Like they don't leave. They're physically in their chair for 8 hours. I instantly thought, how unaware of your body are you? How tuned out are you when you can be in one spot in a cubicle for an 8 hour stretch? You've taken the skill of tuning out physical sensation to a level that's damaging now. You've lost
Absolutely.
awareness.
I would argue a lot of people have that dissociation and we're not even aware of it. I've found in my own developmental work that as I've become more cognizant, people don't understand it because they're not in my head, but I will smell new smells or I will see things that were all around me before and I couldn't, or I'll experience emotions and there's just a different depth. And then you realize, oh, I was dissociated and I didn't realize it because it's been prolonged for so long. And I think a lot of people are in that state and they don't even realize it.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, with this, I've taken a lot of your time and I appreciate it so much. I can't wait to honestly review this, dissect it, because I'm the one that learns the most from doing all this. And I really hope that the people that listen to this understand the gravity of the points you're making. And I want to iterate to the audience. I won't go into detail, but Toby has walked the walk and talked the talk in a way that few people can say they've ever done. And he's been through things that would break most people in half. And he has selected to have helpful thoughts, have helpful behaviors, have helpful actions when he was going through essentially what I would call what people relate to as the ultimate purgatory of life that can be experienced in these days. And it's impressive. It is extraordinarily impressive. And I'm a person that doesn't listen to somebody unless I respect them. And I highly respect you, Toby. And that's why when you tell me these things, I sit there and think to myself, how am I going to do this? Even from today, I'm like, this is something I want to do. And low hanging fruit, for instance, is the mindfulness. I am going to reinstitute and focus heavily on my mindfulness meditation. I'm concerned about my level of doing it. Doesn't matter. I've got to start somewhere. And then the other thing I'm going to focus on is a lot of intentional, volitional thought. And that really resonates with me because one thing I've strived for my whole entire life is to be a deadly critical thinker, to recognize patterns. It comes from my background in physics. And then moving forward into everything I've done, I always want to be that person that can understand things and break them down. And when people strengthen themselves cognitively like this, when you become a volitional actor in your own life, and even if you're weak, and I will admit this muscle is extremely weak for me. I have depended for large portions of my life on other people's thinking. I think that's one of the weaknesses of being an intellectual is we find ourselves gravitating towards what would they say? What would they do? And I think Ralph Waldo Emerson hits this nail on the head when he says in his essay on self-reliance, who is Moses? Who is Abraham? Like, speak from your own thoughts and give them the validity they deserve. Go ahead. You had something to say, Toby.
No, I love that. That is absolutely beautiful.
Okay.
That is absolutely beautiful. Yeah. I think that 100% quote's perfect.
I love him. A lot of people don't understand the value of what he illustrated. You can even go back to John Stuart Mill and his work on liberty. There are these concepts that are very important that people don't understand that, and I want to illustrate this poignantly. You are going to have everything fighting against you to be autonomous because society bluntly does not benefit in terms of control from having you be an autonomous agent. Therefore, you are going to find automatic responses in countless myriad of ways that are going to cause you to gravitate back towards social conformity. But your highest level of satisfaction and benefit is to follow the things of joy that you've spoken of and to be an autonomous volitional actor in your own life, to have self-efficacy, to have self-esteem, to have self-confidence. And it doesn't matter if you don't have it. Start doing today the things that will acquire it. Start the positive thinking. Start the positive action. Don't allow yourself to speak negatively of yourself. Don't allow yourself to sit in negative emotions and negative thoughts. Recognize them and look at them and don't push them away because resisting them only makes them worse. But do not entertain them because that's the only way to develop new neural pathways. And it will not be easy, but you will become more powerful. It's like weightlifting. You'll become bigger, you'll become stronger, you'll become more competent, and it will take time. That's what I have to say to end it for me. Do you have any last comments you want to say, Toby?
I, I think I think another way to summarize that up is challenge reality
Ooh, challenge. Ah, you simplified it.
and challenge your reality is really
Yes.
challenge your reality.
I'm going to put that in a quote and I'm going to put that in an ideogram and send that out. Challenge your reality. Toby Larson.
Challenge your reality.
Thank you so much, Toby.
Thank you, James.
Okay. I'll get this going and I'll get back to you shortly.
Awesome. I think it's absolutely wild how much can be done through AI now. It makes total sense because I worked with the guys for well one of my friends in Half Moon Bay. He's the executive producer, editor, or whatever for Mind Pump. So he's been with Mind Pump since they started their first podcast,
Yeah.
and he works in their studios and stuff. And his editing work, for the most part, it's not it's not the photographer in the field capturing the moment. It's a lot more the photographer having set hue values that you set to the colors if it's this type of shot and doing that tedious work of
Yeah.
just adjusting dials. So that you could give a little fuzzy logic, you could put a little fuzzy logic on a system and it could do that work for you as long as the fuzzy logic's robust enough to like understand you can actually tell it this is quality and this is ugly.
Yeah.
And we're there now already. And so it's like just wild to see like all those editor positions, all those editor jobs. It's like now it's AI. Fiverr is going to be out of business within 2 years.
Oh, absolutely. Fiverr's going to be out of business. And like, for instance, the tool I am testing out for the next month is called Vidya AI. And it's going to basically take this whole Zoom and it's going to use AI to rate it on which segments and sizes are most likely to go viral. And it will turn them into shorts. It'll give them scripts. It'll give them all the data I need. And it's ready to go. And it will automatically correct the audio, make everything ideal. And this way it cuts down 90% of my time on doing this. I can get this newsletter out today by taking the transcript, plugging it into AI, having it prepare a newsletter with the tone and structure I want. I can get the podcast out today and it will be on Apple, it'll be on Spotify, it'll be everywhere. And then I can automate using Zapier, for instance, and I can pump this out to Twitter. I can set up a repository. I can pump it out using Buffer. You can use Hootsuite. It doesn't matter anymore. And I think this is going to be very hard for people. Like we're talking about challenge your reality. I think that is so difficult because it's like, what is the saying to quote? a fish is to water as a bird is to air, as a man is to himself. The Hindu proverb. Becoming self-aware and challenging reality is extraordinarily difficult, but understand that reality, as you see it, like you said, epistemologically, you don't see reality as it is. And when you accept that, and when you accept you're lensing everything through your choice beliefs, then you can start to make real change. And you do need to believe you can make real change. Sorry, I keep pivoting back to these self things, but I think this is one thing that people desperately need. We didn't touch on it, but attention focus right now with the AI era and the propaganda that's been developed through artificial intelligence and manipulation is off the charts. Our country is being manipulated, not just internally, but externally. Become self-aware.
Yeah. Yeah. It's,
So,
and we're in the era of the, yeah, like, I don't know what's going to happen when Florida gets cut in half by a category 5 hurricane. Like, and then Milton might not be the one that does it, but one of them is going to do it in the next 5 years. I mean, like, yeah, it's a critical time for people to break out and start to think for themselves and be more capable. Because I think, there's two things that I saw go on with Helene. One of the things was people kind of outsourced their decision on how to deal with what was coming to TikTok videos.
so bad.
And and then that means that the TikTok algorithm was that is optimized for keeping you on the app is what sourced the information that they made critical life and death decisions from.
That's
Like,
terrifying.
right? Whether the government was accurate or not in its information didn't matter. It
Yeah,
didn't matter because they were getting information sourced from an algorithm, from an app that creates essentially a new type of addiction that we haven't labeled yet.
absolutely. It uses an interest graph. It is addictive. And I'm reading Gary Vee's book right now, Day Trading Attention. And, you can look at it however you want. I'm going to be genuine about it. Welcome to the 2.0 of cigarette companies. You're
Yeah.
dealing with an extraordinarily powerful addictive mechanic that's eroding attention spans. And I myself, yeah, I use these mediums. I use TikTok to distribute. TikTok is phenomenal for distributing your content. It is the best system, in my opinion. You have Blue Sky, though, that I'm going to look into that seems to be growing and garnering attention. But ultimately, everything's moving towards these interest graphs. Facebook, in large measure, is failing because they're trying to do that, but they still have it centered around people. And Instagram's moving that way. YouTube's moving that way. And in a couple of years, they'll all be that way. But good God, what is that going to do to us? Like you said, attention.
So that's the other problem too. Yeah, because the capitalistic forces are, hey, if this gets 2% more than our version, then we're going to migrate towards that version. So it creates
Absolutely.
this monoculturist aspect to it too. It's just like ongoing hell.
And I would say in this way, for instance, people being dogmatic, for instance, I'm a capitalist. I'm not stupid to the fact that capitalism has some serious flaws. If it didn't, we wouldn't have corrupt FDA, FBI, CIA, all that BS that are largely lobbying. We wouldn't have long-term, infinite-term politicians. There's so many issues. However, the same argument still is going to be there, though the same problems are still going to be there with a socialistic structure in some ways, because you still have, to be blunt, the people that really don't care about you a lot of times at the top and are really good at faking they do. And they are very hard to detect. There's a reason they call them a sociopath. And I don't mean a lot of people are this way. How many people on average actually out of 100 are actually sociopathic?
Oh gosh, it's like less than a thousandth of a percent. It's
And
like,
that's what I mean.
yeah,
Like they are a rarity, and people don't understand that. And when I hate how rare are narcissists, like real ones.
yeah, that's super rare too. That's like a single digit percentage tops.
And
But narcissism is in the ocean model of personality. Narcissism's, one of the five major personality traits, and it's adaptive. Like narcissism's inherent. Of course, you're going to care about yourself first. Your hunger is
yeah,
what you have to address. People aren't going to address that for you.
using Christianity on itself, the statement made that a house divided cannot stand. When you're ashamed of being a narcissist or having narcissistic propensities, you are divided against yourself and you cannot stand. You have to be for yourself.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's innate. And I like the interpretation. I'm sure you've read The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. His beginning parable or reference to Narcissus and a different interpretation. They're like, oh, Narcissus died here at the pool. And he's like, because he was always admiring his beauty, he fell in. But when the pool was asked about Narcissus, it's like, well, I miss him because I saw my own beauty reflected through his eyes because Narcissus had an innate love for himself. It was just a different interpretation. And I think it's more valuable to look at it that way personally.
yeah. And I fundamentally believe
Hmm.
uh, there. I mean, I'm fully agnostic, so I don't believe there ever was prophets. I believe they're all just stories and rumors, and by and large, uh, put together by the ruling class with the priest class, which is part of the ruling class in ancient times, to control the population,
Absolutely.
to
And
use fear and shame as the ultimate societal levers to get people to exchange their labor for insufficient in a in a in an unfair exchange, to give up their labor for less than the value of that labor. You have to create God. How do you create God? You know what? When you're dead, you're not dead. You live on. So don't be afraid of life being finite. Death is scary. So let's deal with that fear by putting Sky Wizard in there. And Sky Wizard's very judgy. He's
yeah,
a very judgy Sky Wizard. So if, you know, if you look at something wrong, Sky Wizard's probably not going to like you anymore. And and then you're going to need to spend the rest of your life trying to make Sky Wizard happy, trying to people please Sky Wizard because you've lost favor with him. Actually, you know what I found out? Sky Wizard's sling came down and he said, "You're all fucked."
so many people are going to take odds with these statements, but they're a valid answer to this. There are massive control mechanics built into a lot of religions, and there are massive control mechanics built into a lot of socialization. There's a really good book called Combating Cult Mind Control. And all the book is really about is teaching you what are manipulative and control practices and understanding that a cult can even be a family. It can be down to the father or the mother manipulating the environment, using negative connotations, using shame. And I'll be forward with you. I have caught myself using those tools that were used on me. And I have desperately worked at undoing that because it is so maladaptive and it is so unhealthy. Obviously, it did its damage on me. So, but see, look at this. We can just talk forever because you and I have a lot of the same interests and we see things a lot the same way. I love Yuval Harari. His statement on this, whether you like him or hate him, he's a brilliant thinker. And he said, you promise a monkey like 72 bananas in heaven to give up his banana now. He's going to look at you and he doesn't care. He's like, no, 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 no. This is my banana now. Leave it the hell alone. But I think that you can see productive religions too, though. But any productive religion isn't going to have a priest class, isn't going to have any control mechanics, isn't going to have a tithing. It's simply going to espouse autonomy, self-development. And whether you agree with them or not, models can be useful, right? And I'm a spiritualist, so I look at those models, but I definitely am very adverse and I abhor anyone trying to manipulate or control anyone else. And I hate it.
I worry that the field of psychology is becoming the next iteration of religion. And
I was
why that
science.
worries me is that I can see psychology starting to delineate things that are good and things that are bad.
Absolutely.
That's what religion is. And the problem is good for whom, bad for whom,
Yeah.
because nothing is universally good and nothing is universally bad. There is no absolute in this world. Everything's on a spectrum,
Yeah.
to go back full circle. But that's, yeah, it's like it, and places where that's coming. I mean, it's, we're in the early days of it. That's why I think some of the political discourse that exists and why that political discourse is on specific issues like trans, LGBTQ, abortion, uh, prayer, that type of stuff is because the the next iteration is coming and it's rising in popularity and power.
Yeah.
Is the field of psychology, and social media the is the mechanism in which it's being evangelized across the world.
What people don't realize,
Narcissism, the whole fascination with people being narcissists and narcissistic behavior
God, it drives
comes
me
from the
nuts.
field of psychology, and it's being processized via social media. And a
Hmm.
lot of PhD psychologists, creators talking about narcissistic abuse, all these things.
Yeah.
It's no different in my mind. It's quickly becoming general conference type of thing, where now we listen to Gabermonte tell us the truth.
Trust. Yeah. This is the hardest thing. Think for
We
yourself.
listen to
It's
Edith
so hard.
Carell tell us the truth about relationships. We listen to the Goffman Institute tell us these are absolute truth. These four horsemen are absolute truth. We know it with 99.9% accuracy because we've done the science, because
Bingo.
it's based on statistics, and statistics tell us truth.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. Statistics are
Right.
based on the rings and fields that we agreed upon in the Arabic numeral system.
Really quickly, Toby. I do want to continue. Can't compete.
Oh yeah, no, what we call it a day on this one, and let's see where this ends up, and then because I gotta get my
Okay.
dog to vet too.
Okay.
But this would be a good breaking point.
Let's do it. Thank you so much, Toby. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, James. This is super fun.
Okay. I'll let you know once it's up.
Cool. Sounds good. All
Okay.
right. Talk
See
to
ya.
you again soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.